I succumbed to the allure of a young intern at work, but never thought it could turn out this way. I will tell you what happened to my family and my jealous husband. The smell of garlic sizzling in olive oil filled the kitchen as I rushed to drain the pasta, the boiling water hissing against the sink. My phone buzzed on the counter, but I ignored it. Luke's car wasn't in the driveway yet, and I was trying to get dinner done before he walked through the door. The kitchen was hot, the steam from the pot fogging up the window above the sink. Then the buzz came again. This time, it wasn't just a text, it was the specific chime I'd set for Eric. My stomach twisted. I wiped my hands on a towel, grabbed the phone, and saw his name glowing on the screen. "Are you free after work tomorrow?" My pulse spiked. I set the phone down like it was a ticking bomb. The text was harmless, right? Just Eric being playful. But deep down, I knew it wasn't innocent. I turned back to the stove, stirring the sauce furiously, trying to focus. But my phone buzzed again. Another message. I snatched it up, my hands shaking slightly. "Come on, Alexis, say yes."
You know you want to.
Before I could stop myself, I typed back. "Depends."
Where are you taking me?
The moment I hit send, the garage door roared to life. Luke was home. Panic shot through me. I slammed my phone onto the counter and grabbed the nearest dish towel, pretending to clean up the mess around the stove. The sound of the door opening echoed through the house, followed by Luke's heavy footsteps. He walked into the kitchen, his tie undone and his shirt rumpled. "Hey," he muttered, barely looking at me as he dropped his briefcase by the door. "Hey," I said too quickly, my voice pitched a little higher than usual. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced around the kitchen. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just, finishing up dinner," I stammered, stirring the sauce like my life depended on it. Luke didn't say anything else. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and headed to the living room, where I heard the familiar click of the TV and the low hum of a sports announcer. I leaned against the counter, exhaling hard. My heart was racing, but I didn't even know why. Nothing had happened yet. I glanced at my phone. Eric's message was still there, the screen taunting me. "Tomorrow. Same time." I typed back, then deleted it. Then typed it again. "Mom." A sudden voice cut through the tension, and I jumped, nearly knocking over the sauce. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, barreled into the kitchen, waving a drawing. "Look what I made." "Wow, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile as she shoved the paper in my hands. "It's beautiful." She beamed, but before I could say anything else, Luke called out from the living room. "Lily, come here. Let's pick a movie." "Coming," she yelled, racing out of the room. The moment I was alone again, I grabbed my phone and stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the send button. My breath was shallow, my chest tight, as though I were on the edge of a cliff. I hit send. The next day at work, the office buzzed with energy. Phones ringing, heels clicking against the tile floors, coworkers chatting by the coffee machine. But my focus was split. My phone sat on my desk, face down, and every time it buzzed, my pulse jumped. "Alexis." Eric's voice snapped me out of my daze. I looked up and there he was leaning against my cubicle wall. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and he had that trademark grin that always felt a little too confident for his age. "You ready for lunch?" he asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. My heart thudded. I nodded, grabbing my bag. "Yeah, let's go." We walked to the cafe 2 blocks down, the kind of trendy place that felt like a safe haven from the chaos of the office. Eric ordered a cappuccino, and I got my usual iced tea. We sat in the corner, away from the windows, and talked about everything and nothing. But as we were leaving, my stomach dropped. Across the street, standing by a florist display, was Amanda, our neighbor. Her sharp blue eyes locked on mine, and she didn't blink. "Someone you know?" Eric asked, glancing in her direction. "Just my neighbor," I muttered, trying to stay calm. Amanda's gaze didn't waver. I pulled Eric's arm. "Let's go." That evening, Luke was already home when I walked in. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. The sight of him made my stomach twist with guilt. "How is work?" he asked, not looking up. "Fine," I said, setting my bag down and heading to the kitchen. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I glanced at the notification, a new message from Eric. "Can't stop thinking about today." I froze, my hand tightening around my phone. I didn't notice Luke standing in the doorway until he spoke. "Who's texting you?" My blood ran cold. The knife hit the cutting board harder than I intended, and the sharp sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. Luke's voice from the doorway startled me. "Where were you?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. His tone wasn't casual. It was sharp, heavy with suspicion. I froze for a second, then turned around, gripping the knife tightly like it might steady me. "What do you mean?" "I was at work, obviously." "Really?" he said, his eyes narrowing. "Because I called your office. They said you left early." My heart skipped. I felt like I'd just been yanked into the middle of a storm. I had a meeting outside the office," I stammered, trying to sound calm. Luke didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, watching me like he could see right through me. "A meeting," he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "With who?" The air between us felt electric, and I had no idea how to put out the fire. "It was last minute," I said, brushing past him to the stove. My hand shook as I stirred the sauce, the spoon scraping against the pan too loudly. "Why are you interrogating me like this?" "Because something's not right," he snapped, stepping closer. "You've been different, Alexis. Distracted. Always on your phone. Coming home late." I whipped around to face him, my voice rising. "Oh, so now I'm on trial? Maybe if you paid more attention to me, you'd know exactly where I am and what I'm doing." His eyes flared with anger. "Don't you dare try to turn this on me. I'm not the one sneaking around." The words hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to argue, but nothing came out. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make things worse. Luke shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Unbelievable," he muttered, grabbing his keys from the counter. "Where are you going?" I demanded. "Out," he said without looking back. Then the door slammed shut, and I was alone in the deafening silence. I couldn't sit still. Every sound in the house made my skin crawl. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the soft creak of the floorboards, all of it grated against my nerves. I paced the living room, biting my nails, glancing at the door every few minutes. Where was he?
Who was he with?
Was he really just cooling off, or was he doing something worse? My mind spiraled, replaying the argument over and over. His accusations, my weak excuses. The way he'd looked at me, like I was someone he didn't even know. I checked my watch. An hour had passed. Then 2. When the sound of the garage door finally broke the silence, my heart lurched. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, waiting for him to walk in. Luke entered slowly, his shirt untucked, his hair slightly messy. He didn't look at me as he tossed his keys onto the table. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Out," he said flatly. I crossed my arms, my nails digging into my skin. "You can't just leave like that and not tell me where you're going." He finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "Oh, now you care where I am?" I flinched at his tone but refused to back down. "Yes, I care. You storm out, come back hours later looking like this, and I'm just supposed to ignore it." Luke's smirk was bitter, almost cruel. "Funny. That's exactly what you expect me to do with you. What the hell is that supposed to mean?" I snapped, stepping closer. "You know exactly what it means, Alexis," he shot back. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and my breath caught. Was he just guessing, or did he know? My head spun as he turned and walked toward the bedroom. "We're not done talking about this," I yelled after him. He stopped in the hallway, his back to me. "You're right," he said without turning around. "We're not." Then he disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me standing there, shaking. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the tension between us so thick I could barely breathe. Luke's side of the bed creaked as he turned over, his back to me. I wanted to say something, anything to break the silence, but I didn't know how. The sound of his steady breathing should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It felt like a wall between us, solid and unyielding. Sleep didn't come. My thoughts churned, dragging me deeper into guilt and frustration. I thought about everything, about Luke, about the life we'd built, about how far we'd drifted apart. And then I thought about what I'd done. I turned to look at Luke's back, and for the first time, I wondered if he'd ever forgive me. The morning after, the tension was still suffocating. Luke barely acknowledged me as he grabbed his coffee, his jaw tight and eyes locked on his phone. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through emails, but my stomach churned. The silence between us wasn't just awkward, it was hostile. "I'll be home late tonight," he said suddenly, his voice clipped. "Why?" I asked, more sharply than I meant to. He raised an eyebrow, finally looking up. "Work," he said flatly. It was the way he said it, like he didn't care if I believed him or not, that made my chest tighten. I swallowed hard. "You sure it's work?" His eyes darkened, and he leaned forward slightly. "Are you?" The air between us was so charged it felt like something might snap. I opened my mouth to fire back, but his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the moment. He glanced at it, smirked, and stood. "See you tonight," he said, walking out the door without another word. Work was impossible. Every email, every meeting, every little thing felt like too much. My thoughts kept drifting back to Luke, where he was, what he was doing, and worse, who he might be with. By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked out of the office and headed to the park nearby, needing to clear my head. The crisp Chicago air stung my cheeks as I paced the path, my heart racing. I replayed last night's argument over and over, dissecting every word, every glance. Was I overthinking it? Was Luke just blowing off steam? Or was he really trying to send a message? "Alexis." A familiar voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned to see Amanda standing a few feet away, her arms crossed and a smug smile tugging at her lips. "Out for a stroll?" she asked, tilting her head like she already knew the answer. I forced a smile. Just needed some air. Amanda took a step closer, her gaze sharp. "You know, I saw Luke last night." My heart skipped. "What?" She smiled wider, enjoying the reaction. "He stopped by my place. Looked like he needed a friend." A cold wave of dread washed over me. "Why would he come to your house?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Amanda shrugged, her expression smug. "Maybe because he felt like talking to someone who actually listens."
Her words hit like a slap.
"What are you trying to say?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just that it's funny how karma works, isn't it?" I didn't know whether to scream or cry. Instead, I turned and walked away, my legs trembling as I put as much distance as possible between us. When I got home that evening, the house was eerily quiet. Luke's car wasn't in the driveway, and the emptiness felt heavier than usual. I paced the living room, my thoughts spiraling. Was Amanda lying? Was she exaggerating just to get under my skin? Or had Luke really gone to her house? The sound of the garage door startled me. I froze, my heart pounding as Luke walked in. His shirt was untucked, and there was a faint smell of perfume clinging to him. One that wasn't mine. "You're late," I said, my voice shaking. "So," he replied, setting his keys on the counter. "So, where were you?" I demanded, crossing my arms. He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "Out." "With Amanda?" I pressed, my voice rising. Luke smirked, leaning against the counter. "And if I was? What difference would it make?" His words hit like a punch, and I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "You're serious?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He straightened, his smirk fading. "What do you expect, Alexis? You think I don't know what's been going on? You've been lying to me for weeks." I opened my mouth to deny it, but he cut me off. Don't bother, he snapped. I'm done playing the fool. You want to sneak around? Fine. Two can play that game. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice shaking with anger. No, Alexis, he said coldly, grabbing his phone and heading toward the bedroom. What's unbelievable is that you thought I wouldn't notice. He disappeared down the hall, leaving me standing in the middle of the room, trembling with rage and guilt. An hour later, I was still sitting on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I snatched it up, half expecting another blow to land. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I read the words. Are you ready to lose everything? The text felt like a slap. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the message blurring as my heart pounded in my chest. Are you ready to lose everything? The words were a threat, a dare, and a promise all rolled into one. I shot up from the couch, pacing the room. Who could have sent it? Amanda? Luke? Or was it someone else? My mind raced through possibilities, every one worse than the last. The sound of the bedroom door opening made me freeze. Luke stepped out, his face a mask of indifference as he grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. Who's texting you now? He asked coldly, not even looking at me. None of your business, I snapped, stuffing the phone into my pocket. He finally turned, his eyes narrowing. None of my business? You're kidding, right? Everything about this is my business, Alexis. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. You've got nerve acting like this after last night. Amanda told me everything. That got his attention. His jaw tightened, but his smirk returned. Oh, Amanda told you? And you just believed her, huh? That's rich. Stop lying. I shouted, my frustration spilling over. Why would she make it up? You went to her house, Luke. His smirk faded, replaced by something darker. Maybe I did, he said, his voice low and steady. And maybe it's because I'm tired of being your backup plan. The words knocked the wind out of me. What is that supposed to mean? You think I don't know what you've been doing? He shot back, his voice rising. You're always on your phone, sneaking off to God knows where. You think I don't see the way you've changed. You're one to talk, I spat. You've been distant for years, Luke. You don't even see me anymore. Maybe because you stopped being someone worth seeing, he snapped, and the venom in his voice made me flinch. We stood there, glaring at each other, the air between us so thick I could barely breathe. Then his phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the tension. He glanced at it, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt. Who is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Luke picked up the phone, shoving it into his pocket. None of your business, he said, throwing my own words back at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I marched past him, grabbing my jacket and keys.
Where are you going? He demanded.
Out, I said, not bothering to look back. I didn't have a plan. I just drove, my hands gripping the wheel as I replayed the argument over and over in my head. Every word stung. Every glance cut deeper. By the time I realized where I was, my car was parked in front of Amanda's house. The porch light was on, and through the window, I could see her sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Confronting her felt reckless, but I was done playing it safe. I stepped out of the car and marched to the door, knocking hard. Amanda appeared a moment later, her eyebrows raising in mock surprise. Alexis, she said, leaning against the doorframe. What brings you here? You know exactly why I'm here, I snapped. I want the truth. Did Luke come here last night? She smirked, crossing her arms.
He did.
And he stayed for a while. My stomach twisted. What happened? She tilted her head, clearly enjoying this. What do you think happened? I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I don't have time for your games, Amanda. Just tell me. She stepped closer, her smile fading. Look, I'm not the one who started this mess. If your marriage is falling apart, maybe you should take a look in the mirror. Her words hit harder than I expected. You don't know anything about my marriage, I shot back. Oh, I know plenty, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. You're not as good at hiding things as you think, Alexis. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her smirk returning. Looks like Luke's free tonight. Guess I should let you go. That was it. I lost it. I grabbed the phone out of her hand and threw it onto the porch, the screen shattering on impact. Amanda gasped, her shock quickly turning into rage. What the hell is wrong with you? She shouted, stepping closer. You want to mess with my marriage? I shouted back, my voice trembling. Let's see how much fun you have without your stupid games. Amanda pushed me hard and I stumbled back. My blood was boiling as I lunged at her, shoving her into the doorframe. The sound of footsteps and a loud voice broke through the chaos. Alexis. I turned to see Luke standing at the edge of the driveway, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. What the hell are you doing here? He demanded. What am I doing? I yelled, pointing at Amanda. Ask her. Ask her why she's so interested in tearing us apart. Luke's eyes darted between us, his hands clenching into fists. Both of you stop it.
Now.
Amanda straightened her blouse, her smirk returning. Your wife's a real firecracker, Luke. You might want to get her under control. Luke shot her a glare before turning to me. Get in the car, Alexis.
Now.
I hesitated, my heart still racing, but the look in his eyes left no room for argument. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me. This wasn't just a fight, it was war. And the battlefield was my life. The car ride home was pure silence, except for the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears. Luke's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He didn't look at me once. I stared out the window, replaying the chaos on Amanda's porch. My hands still tingled from shoving her, and the shame of Luke catching me like that was unbearable. I wanted to say something, anything, to cut through the tension, but the words caught in my throat. When we pulled into the driveway, Luke turned off the engine but didn't move. His grip on the steering wheel loosened, and he finally exhaled. What were you thinking, Alexis? He asked, his voice low and controlled, but every word felt like a loaded weapon. I wasn't, I admitted, still staring out the windshield. I lost it, Luke. She was taunting me, saying things about you, about us. So, what? You decided to fight her? He finally turned to me, his eyes blazing. You're not a teenager, Alexis. You don't solve problems by throwing punches. I wasn't punching her. I snapped, my own anger bubbling up. And what do you care? You're the one who gave her a reason to start this in the first place.
His jaw tightened.
I didn't give her anything. You did that all on your own. My chest burned with frustration. Don't you dare pin this on me. Amanda wouldn't even be a factor if you hadn't gone to her house last night. What were you thinking, Luke? Did you just want to hurt me? Was that the plan? Luke looked away, his silence cutting deeper than any response. I can't believe this, I whispered, more to myself than him. You can't believe this? He shot back, his voice rising. You're the one sneaking around, meeting God knows who behind my back, and you want to play the victim now. That's rich, coming from the guy who's suddenly best friends with Amanda. I spat. Luke opened his mouth to respond, but then he stopped. His head tilted slightly, and his eyes narrowed. You really don't get it, do you? Get what? I demanded. This isn't about Amanda.
Or me.
It's about you, Alexis. You threw the first punch in this marriage the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you anymore. His words hit like a slap, and I couldn't respond. I sat there, stunned, as he opened the door and got out of the car. Inside, Luke disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. I stayed in the kitchen, pacing back and forth, my hands shaking. The fight replayed in my head, every word cutting deeper with each repetition. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge as if it might hold me together. My thoughts spiraled. Was Luke right? Had I been the one to ruin everything? Or was he just deflecting, trying to pin the blame on me so he didn't have to face his own mistakes? The bedroom door creaked open and Luke walked out, now dressed in jeans and a hoodie. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "Out," he said flatly, grabbing his keys from the counter. "Out where?" He didn't answer. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone with the silence again. Hours passed, and Luke still wasn't back. I sat on the couch, my legs curled under me, staring at the TV without really watching. My phone sat on the coffee table, and I glanced at it every few minutes, waiting for a text, a call, something. Finally, headlights flashed through the window, and I heard the familiar rumble of the garage door. My stomach twisted. Luke walked in, his hoodie pulled tight around his face, the smell of cheap cologne clinging to him. He tossed his keys onto the counter, avoiding my gaze. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice steadier this time. "Out," he repeated, heading toward the bathroom. I followed him, my frustration boiling over. "That's not an answer, Luke. I want to know where you were." He stopped in the hallway, turning to face me. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something cold, detached. "Do you really want to know?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I said, crossing my arms.
Ido.
He took a step closer, his gaze locked on mine. "I was with Amanda." The words hit like a punch to the gut. My arms dropped to my sides, and my throat tightened. "You're lying," I whispered. "Am I?" he said, his tone almost casual. "You don't get to demand honesty from me, Alexis. Not after what you've done." I shook my head, trying to process his words. "So, that's it? You're just going to throw this in my face? What are you trying to prove?" Luke stepped back, his smirk fading. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just doing what you've been doing all along. Whatever the hell I want." My chest ached as I watched him walk away, the bathroom door slamming shut behind him. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Luke stayed in the bedroom, and I stayed on the couch, my mind spinning. Every emotion crashed over me: anger, guilt, sadness, betrayal. I thought about Amanda, her smug smile, her cryptic comments. Was this her plan all along? To worm her way into my marriage and destroy it from the inside out? Or was it me? Had I given her the opening? The house felt heavier than ever, every creak and groan amplifying the emptiness. I glanced at my phone, the screen dark and silent. For the first time, I didn't know if I wanted it to stay that way, or if I was waiting for something that would make it all worse. The next morning, the air in the house felt suffocating. I could hear Luke moving around upstairs, drawers opening and closing with sharp snaps. My stomach churned as I sipped my coffee at the kitchen table, every sound from above making my grip on the mug tighten. I couldn't ignore what he said last night. I was with Amanda. The words circled in my mind like vultures, each pass picking away at my thoughts. Was it true? Was it just a cruel way to hurt me? The sound of his footsteps on the stairs made my heart jump. He appeared in the doorway, dressed in his usual business casual, holding a duffel bag. "You're leaving?" I blurted out, the panic in my voice undeniable. "Just for a couple of days," he said flatly, setting the bag by the door. "Where are you going?" "To clear my head," he said, his tone void of emotion. "I can't stay here right now." I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "Luke, we need to talk about this, about last night." "What's there to talk about?" he said, his voice rising slightly. "You made your choices. I'm making mine." I took a step toward him, my voice trembling. "So that's it? You're just going to run off and leave me here to figure this out on my own?" He turned, his jaw tight, his eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. "Figure what out, Alexis? What do you even want? Because right now, it looks like you want to keep sneaking around with your office boy while I sit here and play the fool." "That's not fair," I shot back. "You don't even know the whole story." "Then tell me," he snapped, his voice echoing through the kitchen. The words were on the tip of my tongue, an apology, an explanation, anything to take back the damage, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. The weight of my guilt pressed down too hard. "That's what I thought," he said bitterly. He grabbed the duffel bag and opened the door. "I'll let you know when I'm coming back." Luke. The door slammed shut before I could finish. The rest of the day was a blur. I wandered the house aimlessly, replaying the fight over and over in my head. Every word, every accusation, felt like another crack in a foundation that was already crumbling. Around noon, my phone buzzed. I hesitated, afraid to look, but curiosity won. It was Amanda. "You and Luke good? Haven't seen him around today." The audacity of her message made my blood boil. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't find the words. Anything I said would just give her more satisfaction. Instead, I threw my phone onto the couch and paced the living room, my heart racing. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and headed out, not even sure where I was going until I pulled into Amanda's driveway. The lights in her living room were on, and I could see her silhouette through the curtains. My chest tightened as I stepped out of the car, my mind buzzing with everything I wanted to say. I knocked hard on the door, and it swung open moments later. Amanda stood there in yoga pants and a tank top, a wine glass in hand, her expression caught between surprise and amusement. Well, she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." I pushed past her into the house. "We need to talk." She closed the door, unfazed by my intrusion. "By all means, Alexis. What's on your mind?" I spun to face her, my hands clenched into fists. "What are you playing at? Sending me texts, telling Luke things, acting like you're his friend. What's your endgame, Amanda?" Her smirk deepened. "Endgame? Honey, you're doing all the damage yourself. I'm just watching the show." "You've been feeding him lies," I snapped. "Trying to turn him against me." "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "Like you needed my help for that. You did this, Alexis. All I did was shine a light on it." I took a step closer, my voice dropping. "Stay out of my marriage." "Your marriage?" she repeated, laughing bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a circus act, full of lies, secrets, and a lot of bad decisions." The words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't back down. "You don't know anything about my marriage." Amanda set her wine glass down and stepped closer, her smirk fading. "I know this. You're losing him. And if you're not careful, you'll lose everything else too." The weight of her words settled over me, suffocating. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. We both turned toward the window as headlights flashed through the curtains. Luke's car. Amanda arched an eyebrow. Perfect timing. The door opened, and Luke stepped inside, his expression hardening when he saw us. His eyes flicked between Amanda and me, his jaw tightening. "What's going on here?" he asked. I crossed my arms, my voice shaking. "I came to talk to her." "Why?" he demanded, his tone sharp. Amanda chimed in, her voice sweet. "Alexis had some questions about last night." Luke's eyes locked on mine, and the tension in the room thickened. "So now you're interrogating her?" "I'm trying to figure out what's true," I shouted. Luke shook his head, his frustration boiling over. "What's true, Alexis, is that we're both stuck in a mess you started." Amanda's smirk returned as she watched us, her silence louder than words. "I can't do this right now," Luke said, turning toward the door. "Luke, wait." I reached for him, but he pulled away. "You figured out," he said coldly before walking out. The door slammed, leaving Amanda and me alone in the suffocating silence. The house was silent. Too silent. After Luke stormed out, I sat in the living room, staring at the clock. Each second felt like a hammer pounding against my chest. My thoughts spiraled. What if he didn't come back this time? What if I had pushed him too far? I hadn't eaten all day, but the thought of food made me sick. My phone buzzed once, twice, and I didn't even bother to check. Amanda's smug face kept flashing in my mind, her cutting words echoing. You're losing him. And everything else too. I had lost him. Maybe not physically, not yet, but emotionally, spiritually. Luke was gone. Hours passed, the darkness outside thickening, pressing against the windows. The sound of Luke's car pulling into the driveway finally broke the suffocating silence. My heart leapt and sank at the same time. The door opened, and he stepped inside, his face cold, unreadable. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady but distant. I nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. He walked past me, sitting down on the edge of a couch. For a moment, he said nothing, his hands clasped together as he stared at the floor. I've been thinking, he finally said, his tone heavy. About everything. About us. My chest tightened. Luke, Don't, he interrupted, his voice sharp but controlled. Let me finish. I froze, biting my lip to keep the words in. I thought I could deal with it. The lies, the distance, all of it, he said, finally meeting my eyes. But I can't, Alexis. I can't live like this. My stomach dropped. Luke, please, I started, but he shook his head. I'm filing for separation, he said firmly, standing up. The words hit like a physical blow, and I felt the room tilt.
No.
Luke, you can't. I already did. He cut me off. His voice cracked, just a little, but his expression didn't falter. The papers will be here tomorrow. I stood there, frozen, as he walked past me. The sound of his footsteps echoed up the stairs. Then the bedroom door closed. I sank to the floor, my head in my hands. The tears came fast, hot, unstoppable. My chest ached like it was being crushed from the inside. For the first time, I felt the full weight of what I'd done. The lies, the betrayal, the selfishness. It all came crashing down, suffocating me. I had broken my marriage, my home, and now I was left with the rubble. The phone buzzed on the coffee table again. This time, I reached for it, my hand shaking. It was a message from Amanda. Looks like you're finally paying the price. Was it worth it? I threw the phone across the room, the screen shattering against the wall. And then, the silence swallowed me whole. Share your opinion in the comments. What should I have done after my husband found out to save our marriage?